Hi, I'm Michelle Blue. I'm a millennial entrepreneur and started a business just 2 weeks after I graduated college. It's my life and I don't even know. Okay, each week I'm interviewing an entrepreneur, getting a real look at their stories, the lessons, the sacrifices along their journey.
And leadership is hard, and you have to live at home, and entrepreneurship is not easy.
Truly walk by faith and not by sight, and your life being a direct reflection of that belief system.
So, for the fellow entrepreneur, hopeful entrepreneur, or whatever path you decided to take in life, just know that the beauty lies within the journey.
Watching?
The journey.
The journey. All right, I'm going to be watching. All right.
I have to remember all of it through all the craziness, but I absolutely, it's so interesting, Dr. Joy, because I was following your work. So you started a podcast, Therapy for Black Girls, which is really interesting because in the African American community, we always say like mental health has been taboo, and so the fact that you realize like we're going through things and we need safe spaces to talk about it and deal with life. So I think it was really imperative that you started this podcast and started those conversations for people. And so I was really like enthused and excited about the podcast in general. And then I'd say maybe a month or so ago, 2 months ago, UGA did a feature. They were like our alumni spotlight. I was like, Dr. Joy went to UGA. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, I'm reaching out to her. I was like, there's no way she went to UGA and I'm like not like somehow connected to her, and we're at least not formally introduced. And so I'm so glad that like we were able to make this connection, because when I reached out, they were like, oh, Dr. Joy available this one day throughout the rest of the year, and I'm like, this one day. And I was just in Atlanta 2 weeks ago, and I was like, this is one of those moments, it's like I just have to book the ticket and like figure it out type of situation, because I just was like, there's so much here, there's so much to share, and there's such a need for it. And so even for me, I think it's interesting because, as I was sharing with you before, I've gone through a million transitions of life in the last year and a half. And so first moving to New York, and that in itself is a challenge, like that stretches you and grows you in a way like you could never imagine. But also for me on a business side of things, so like right after I graduated college, I launched Benet full time, and so we had gone through a lot of transitions, and we were at a place where we just found out our manufacturer had cheated us out of almost $40,000 worth of fabric, like projected revenues of almost $40,000. And I was literally in a place of, what do I do? Like this is something that I built, so it's like your baby. You have such a strong attachment to it. And I realized like it also, I had like Michelle and Benet had become one, right? It had become my identity. And so with me moving into a new city and me like not having what I thought was my identity was hard. Was super hard, and like I was like, I'm gonna cry through all of this. But it was hard because I had tied so much of who I was to my business, and not having that, I was clueless of who I was. And there was so many moments, so many nights when I was literally shaking from anxiety of not knowing what to do next, of spending 5-6 years and building something and not sure if it was going to continue. The pressures of myself of like, oh, I'm 26, like I should be further in life. Like sometimes these unrealistic expectations and pressures that I had on myself, and it just all came crumbling at once. It all like, it just weighed so heavily on me, and I just like, I felt like everything was just like, I don't know, it was literally a combo, right? From my personal life, my relationships, like business, like I was just at a loss. And I knew, after coming out of that, like I decided that I was going to continue my business even though we had gone through so much. But I also knew that as an entrepreneur, like if you are not taking care of yourself first, then there was no way there could be a Benet. There was no way that I could pour into the journey with Blue and sit here and have conversations with people if I was broken inside. And so I always say, I'm like, I know I'm not the only one going through this, and I know that you have talked to so many entrepreneurs as well. And what do you do? Because obviously I went through my own process, but as a mental health professional, what is your advice? What have you seen that entrepreneurs are dealing with, and how are they coping with it?
Yeah, well, you already shared several of the very common things.
I went through everything.
But I think a lot of what happens is people do tie like their worth and their identity to work.
Yeah.
And when all of that is going great, then that feels great, but then when it's not, it feels horrible, which is what you alluded to, right? And so I think we have to remember that work is something that we do, and even though we may love it and feel passionate about it, like it's something that we do to kind of pay the bills and like afford our lives. It's not actually who we are. And so I think being able to keep those things separate is really important. Not only when things are going well, but especially when things are not going well, so that you realize, okay, things may not be going well with work, but that doesn't mean I'm a failure.
Right.
It just may mean that something needs to be retweaked at work.
How do you detach the two and realize, like, again, they're two separate entities. Michelle is not Benet.
Right.
And whatever goes on with Benet, whether it's the successes or the failures, that's not my identity. That doesn't mean Michelle is a failure. So how do you separate the two?
Yeah, I think that requires some inner digging, right? And I think that happens, I think sometimes we don't realize it until we become entrepreneurs, and then something happens at work, and then we realize how much we tied our own identity to our business. But I think even before you begin owning a business, you have to realize, like, okay, who am I? Like, what are my values? What kinds of things are important to me? And I think you can't forget that once you start your business, or even if you're not owning a business, if you're doing something else, like, it still should not be tied to work. So I think taking a step back and really kind of thinking about, okay, at my foundation, who am I? What kinds of things are important.
Right. And I know, we're all in a transition of life and I think we all go through it where we're trying to find ourselves, right? As an entrepreneur in a corporate space, if you're in school, it's like a level of exploration that you have to go through. What are some of the questions that you ask or practices that you go through to tap into your inner self, to know who you are at your core and allow your work to be birthed out of that, but not you?
Right. Well, I think I like to sometimes take people back to childhood, because I think when you kind of really peel all of those layers back, the kinds of things that you enjoy to do just as play as kids can really give you some insight into the kinds of things that are your gifts and the things that will make you successful in business. So I like to ask people, like, what kinds of things did you enjoy doing as a kid? If you didn't have to get paid for anything, what kind of thing would you be doing? I think the answers to those questions sometimes shock people and then help them realize, like, oh, I'm not actually acting in the way that is true to my core.
My truest
self. And I think a lot of times people, especially entrepreneurs, pour so much into like building their business and growing the business that they're not actually doing things to like refill themselves. So they're not having fun. They're not, maybe spending time with friends and family as much because they're so focused on the business. And I think when you lose those kinds of connections, it makes it difficult to stay connected to your true self as well.
I agree. And I think also with like this like hustle mentality, right? Everyone's like, you gotta, like, if it don't make money, it don't make sense type of mentality, right? And I definitely don't subscribe to that. But because I had such big goals for myself and such big goals for my business or anything that I build and create, I I think I didn't spend as much time in the relationships, right? With like my friends and my family, or you know, and I think that was truly reflected. You know, of course, I mean, I'm so thankful that I have people that have been in my life since kindergarten, right? That I have these strong friendships, but I also don't think I spend as much time nurturing it as much as I should have, because I was so like, I'm like, gotta be a millionaire by 30, you know? And you see everything on social media of like grind hard, with sleeper, what, I don't know, work or die type stuff, you know, whatever the ridiculous sayings are. And that's not, you can't maintain that type of life. And so you need that balance. My mom used to always say as well, like, you have to have an outlet. And so she had me involved in everything as a child. But even coming back to that, like, oh, okay, Michelle, well, you really like playing tennis. Like, why are you not being out? Or like, I like the little things of like hiking and canoeing. Like, why have I not integrated that into my space? So what are some other things that you've seen that people have been able to find that balance of this is who I am, and I'm, you know, making sure that I'm being true to that as well?
I think you also always have to be connected to the bigger question of why. Like, why this business? Why am I doing this thing? Because you just mentioned like, oh, I need to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. Like, who set those rules? Like, who, you know, so we pick up these things and sometimes we just run with it without ever really questioning, why am I so attached to this? Like, why am I working toward this goal that isn't even mine? And so I think really staying connected to why you're doing whatever you're doing is really important, because I think, you know, the money is great and like it affords you like different luxuries and things, but if that's all that it is, then I think it's going to be a difficult road for you. There needs to be something else that you're connecting to related to your business that keeps you moving.
Right. I'm reading this book now by Marianne Williamson, and I'm like, this is so transforming life. But it's in everything that you do, return to love, right? So that's in relationships, that's also in your work and the service that you do, is return to the love in it. And how do you love others? Like, how's that your ministry? And the money will happen, you know, the money and the success will come, but it's important to, at the core of it, your why, the love and the spirit of it, and then everything else will align itself and come.
Yeah, that sounds like a good strategy.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with Marianne Williamson, so.
I know. I'm like, I need to find her next to me on the show. You know, and also, as I was going through this process, I reached out to a therapist. What can you talk me through? Because some people still like, that's a vague thing, right? How can a mental health therapist help you through a situation like I was going through? What are, you know, what is your role as a therapist? What is it? Or are we just gonna sit on the sofa like this and I just like spill my life out and cry? You know, like
that may be a part of it.
That
definitely may be a part of it. But just the way that I'm listening to you, like, you notice, like, I'm reflecting back like some of the things that you're saying, and you're just kind of talking generally, but I'm listening for like, what are the themes that you're talking about? So I was able to pick up on this whole unrealistic expectation of being a millionaire by the time you're 30. So what I'm doing is like pinning these things internally to come back to ask you, like, okay, well, Michelle, where did that come from? Like, what's making you lean down? Right. Yeah. So I mean, so you're really going to like this unbiased person who doesn't know you in any other setting, so that when you talk about all these things, I don't have any history to like say, oh, Michelle, like you always do these kinds of things. I'm really listening with a very fresh ear and an eye. You know, so a therapist can help you to kind of walk through some places where you may feel stuck. Like if you feel like there's some problematic patterns that you've gotten yourself into, a therapist can help you like dump all of that on the table and like, okay, let's wade through this and see what kind of happened here.
Right.
Yeah.
And I probably wanted to go to therapy because I wanted some answers. I like, tell me what I need to be doing, right? And that's not quite what therapy is.
No. People are frustrated by that though, so I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
They're like, okay, run me my money back. Because, like, this is a
You didn't
sham.
tell me what I was supposed to do.
But it's so much work on yourself.
Yeah.
And it makes you, like, of course, will ask questions, but it makes you really it makes me, like, do the work myself. You're not giving me the answers.
Right.
I have to find the answers within. And so that's the hard part,
Right.
truthfully.
Yeah.
And even with relationships, people are like, oh, I want to go and vent about my relationship, but it's not even about the other person. Therapy is always about you.
Right.
Even in a world of a situation of chaos, like it's not about the 50 million people that were a part of the wrong. It's just looking at, even if it was a small part, what is the part that you played in that?
Yeah, and what was your reaction, and where did your reaction come from, right? Because sometimes, we will all have very different reactions to like the same situation, and that's informed by something, so could it be childhood, some past trauma, different relationships we've had, like there's always a reason why we react the ways that we do in certain situations, and so therapy can help you to figure that part out too.
Right. And with that, that's obviously acting in your subconscious. Right? So consciously we're making decisions, we're thinking, we're being logical. But subconsciously there's so much underlying all those moments and memories and experiences that shape us and shape how we decide and shape how we the plans that we make, the businesses that we grow, and things like that. And so how do you tap into deeper of the subconscious? Because I won't always have a therapist to go to, right? So in my everyday life, how can I like step outside of myself and be like, Michelle, like, what is the deeper meaning of this? Like, where does this come from? Like, even my like huge dreams and like hitting sometimes these unrealistic expectations on myself, I have to dig deeper, like, well, why? Why do you feel like you have to be a millionaire by 30? How do I handle that when I'm not necessarily in the space of a mental therapist, a mental health professional?
Yeah, so I think it still requires some level of self-awareness, and a lot of people get that by participating in therapy. But certainly that's not the only way that you could get it, right? I think journaling can also be really helpful for that, because I think a lot of times what happens is that we are just so busy ripping and running that we're not quiet with our thoughts. And so taking some time, like either in the beginning of the day or the end of the day, to just be quiet and alone with your thoughts and maybe doing some journaling can also help you to tap into some of that subconscious stuff too.
I know, like I said, I reached out to a therapist and I went to maybe like 3 sessions. And for me, it just wasn't the best fit in that moment, but I knew the work had to still be done.
Yeah.
So it did look like a lot of journaling. I had to step away from social media. So like the amount of time I spent on that was completely different. Just because I was like, do I really walk away from this feeling good?
Right.
Because unfortunately we all get caught up in comparison wherever you are in the spectrum of life. You're going to compare because there's always going to be someone, there's only one person that's doing better than you. And so you get caught up and hung up on that.
But I want to stop you though, because it's not necessarily that they're doing better, it's that the picture gives you the idea that they're doing better.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's Instagram. Like,
right. You took 20 pictures before you posted the one that you actually...
I know I have to take a million selfies before I get to my optimal
Exactly.
look.
Exactly.
So yes, the appearances of other people doing better, again, added to the pressures of like, what are you doing, Michelle? Like, you should be further. You should be in these spaces. You should be doing this, etc. I also had to spend more time, like I said, in the solitude, in reading, but in those moments of just stillness, whether it's meditation, whether it was just prayer, whether it's like completely surrendering as well, like it had to be done. And even in that place of surrender, I stepped away from the amount of time that I was putting into Benet, into my business, and into, you know, the show, because I knew I had to get me right first, you know, and I was working in such a place of scarcity and in such an anxious space that I had to calm my heart
Yeah.
first. I really did, and because it was so hard. This was probably a whole year of like reflections, and another thing I realized was talking. Which is crazy because I have a talk show, and I, you know, have a life around talking to other people. But in my personal life, I internalize so many things, right? And it's because like I feel like I carry a lot, you know, like I'm always the support or the person to go to in my family or whatever the case may be. So I was going through so much, but it wasn't coming out in any shape or form.
Well, it was, in just in negative ways, or ways that weren't helpful, which is what you figured out.
Right. It was
Yeah, the anxiety and all of that is how it was coming out.
Yeah. And so I had to find a way to manage that. And so, I mean, there were a lot of little things that, you know, God placed in my life that allowed me to release and find a place of surrender and find a better like stillness in myself. But it took time, and it was a lot of little things that over time began to build up, you know. So for me, I found out I was my worst enemy in that. And I think that's also the case with other people, right? So whether it's like telling yourself you can't do it, you know, the self-doubt or the fear, or, you know, we can all be self-deprecating.
Oh, yeah.
How do you break down those mental like barriers within yourself? Mine was obviously the anxiety of having those pressures of what I felt like life should look like. So we all have something. What is your advice on that? Like, how do we overcome whatever our mind is telling us we should be doing, or that we are or aren't?
Yeah. So I think, like you mentioned, really being quiet and being still in those moments, I think is really good. Like we talked about journaling. But I think also like just really getting real with your thoughts. So a lot of times as therapists, we do something called CBT, which is where we will have you like test the reality of what you're saying. So saying like, I am a failure, I never get anything right. So you tell me that and I'm like, okay, well let's actually put it on paper. Like, tell me some of the things that you've tried that have been successful. Like, is there anything you can think of? You're like, oh, I just raised however much money for my business, or oh, I was successful in donating this much to a charity. And so then I'm like, so that wasn't true then.
Right.
So probably there's a lot of times when you're telling yourself something that's not true. And so sometimes putting it on paper can actually help you to like invalidate the reality of that, whatever that thought is that's popping up for you.
Yeah.
And you will do that as many times as you need to with however many thoughts you have like that.
No, that's, I think, a very important exercise, and I went through that exercise.
Good.
And your brain, like, it's just being able to control that, because it's your mind is a very, like, I don't know, it's just so much to it, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of layers.
There's so many layers, and you have to break down, like you said, the truth, the reality, versus whatever figment of our imagination that we're like, you know, coming up with. And my friend, she has a program, and she's like, that's your inner hater. Sasha, she's, you know, is beginning her life coaching businesses, and that's who I did my exercise with. But it's like your inner hater, like what are the critiques that your brain is telling you that's not completely true? You know? I could have sat there like, oh my gosh, I'm an utter failure. Like, I literally just lost almost $40,000, and that's a lot of money. I mean, we're a small business, you know? And I could have gotten stuck on that. Even when I was sharing with mentors, they were like, okay, and like,
it's 40, but it wasn't 400. It could have been 400,000.
I'm like, really? Really? That's not what I need to hear right now.
Right.
Like, can we focus on the 40,000?
Right.
But if I got caught in that, then I wouldn't have seen, first of all, the lives that we've impacted, right? I wouldn't have seen the amount of growth that we've had in these last couple of years. And we've realized, like, in our work, yeah, we have the magazine features, like national magazines, but when we think about if we don't do our work, the lives that are impacted, right? Because, like I said, we're supporting girls in Ghana going through school. If it wasn't for us, like, these girls would almost probably not have this opportunity. And so we know, like, even when we went back to Ghana a couple years ago for our first group of girls graduating, and seeing that, like, yeah, like, we had a small group of girls, but we went back to one of the girls' like houses, her family, and so she's like the oldest of maybe 8 or 9 children. And we think about that, like, yeah, that was Abigail's life, but her being the oldest, like, she impacted, like, she's being an inspiration and example for all these little kids. And her mom was just so gracious to us, right? She was like, thank you, because I wouldn't have been able to do this.
Right.
And that in itself is powerful, you know. And so Abigail, she wants to be a teacher. She wants to go back to her community and, like, you know, share the knowledge that she's received. And so that's for all of us. Like, again, starting with why.
With your why, yes.
Starting with why and realizing, like, life is going to happen, but relieving ourselves of those pressures and knowing that our work is so much greater than us, in whatever that capacity is.
Yes.
Whether you're a custodial worker, whether you're, you know, sitting in conference rooms every day making decisions, there's an impact that's so exponentially bigger than us
It always is.
in everything that we do. And so, again, it's a return to love
Yes.
in our work, but it's also a return to love in ourselves. And that was something that I had to learn, most importantly.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I think I'm even, like, you know, going through another level in this conversation of, like, you're always going to learn something.
Yes.
You're always...
I mean, that's the goal, right? Is that we are always learning. Because if you stop learning, then what are you really doing?
And I'm like, oh Lord, this hurts so much. It was, like, so tragic because when I was going through everything, I was like, this hurts so much. But even in that, I knew that it was so good. It was so needed. And so I was so thankful to God for that. And has gotten me to a place where I feel like I can connect to people on a different level because I've lived through this. And even in sharing, right? This is my first, like, into the blue conversation around mental health and wellness and making sure that you're okay first. And even if I went through it just for this one conversation, because I know that I'm not the only one.
No.
There's someone else, and so I'm like, well, this is my life, and I will, you know, find the love in it and share it for other people, so they can break through whatever blocks or whatever they're going through. You know, again, to being our truest and most authentic selves, tapping into our soul, tapping into our why of what we're meant to do and give this earth, this world, outside of just a business.
Right.
Outside of a business. What are some other practices? I feel like I'm like, this is a real therapy session. People, your therapist doesn't do much talking. Your therapist is here to listen.
Yes.
This is a free therapy session for me that the whole world has just looked in on. I know, it's crazy. And I know you've talked to several different entrepreneurs or just people in general. What are some tangible things that we can do in our everyday lives to make sure that we are mentally well and sound for first before we pour into anything else. Before we pour into our husbands, our boyfriends, or our children, into our careers and businesses. What is the work that we have to do first?
Yeah, so I think one thing that is often overlooked is that we don't pay attention to how much we're sleeping. Because again, that whole grind until whenever, what all these things. Right. Yeah. We actually do need to be getting restorative sleep. Like, we're not robots, and so even though we try to act as if like, oh, I can just crank this out and work on this 24-hour cycle, you're actually not designed to do that. Like, we have bodies that we need to take care of. So people do need to be paying attention to like how much they're sleeping. Also what we're eating, like there's some foods that like taste good, but they're really like trash in our bodies, right? And so again, for entrepreneurs who are always on the go and like just picking up quick bites to eat and that kind of thing, that does begin to have a toll on you in terms of like your focus and your productivity, your energy. So you do want to be paying attention to like the kinds of things that you're eating, as well as making sure that you have a regular exercise routine. Like sometimes like anxiety and depression like can be helped by things like regular physical activity. So what kinds of things are you doing to like take care of the actual like parts of your body? Those things are really important.
Right.
Yeah.
When I do a lot of like my manifestations of like what my dream life is, it includes like that early wake up, like do some type of prayer, devotion, drink a smoothie, like eat healthy on a continual basis, and go work out. I'm still working towards that.
As we all are.
But I am eating healthier.
Good.
And also as a mental health professional, it's like the thing, therapists need therapists. What do you even say for yourself that you do in your life to make sure that, because you're pouring so much into other people. Right. And so much of our work, that's what we're doing. And you're like, okay, well, let me make sure Dr. Joy is cool so I can
pour into other people.
Right. Bring new life to others.
The same kinds of things that I'm talking to you about. And I also think it's really important to set boundaries around like how much work you're doing like at home, like leaving work in the office. I have 2 little ones and a husband, so that really does force me to like get off the computer and stop doing whatever I'm doing because they are demanding of my attention. Right. But I do think you do need to make sure that you're spending time with like loved ones and really nourishing yourself in those ways too, because I think sometimes your loved ones will be the first ones to see that something is a little off, but if you're not paying attention to them or not really spending time with them, then they can't kind of keep that eye on you. So I think that is a multi-layered kind of a protective factor that sometimes we don't pay attention to.
Boundaries, even now I think this is my last point here, but like putting your phone down, whether it is like scrolling at night, whether it's Instagram or just your email. Right. I realized I had to free up my headspace at night so that wasn't the constant circuit, when I was trying to go to sleep. Yeah. And allowing myself to have at least 20 minutes to myself or to read, and then peacefully go to sleep, and then peacefully wake up and start my day with moments of gratitude. Making sure that my space is clean, clutter free, a place that makes me happy. But yeah, there's so many little things. Oh, this is another little thing that I've like taken on, and like even once like at night when I get out of the tub or the shower, like I just have that moment of like gratitude of like when I'm putting on lotion, because like it's all the little things. Yes. In our bodies, there's so much that could go wrong, and so for me to be a healthy human being with all of my faculties and like moving legs and everything else, like just thank you. Thank you. And putting that into my atmosphere first, instead of I have to, and just like thank you for all that I have.
you're really talking about creating mindfulness practices in your daily life, like just the sensation of putting lotion on your body, or what does the water feel like when we're in the shower, like being in the moment of whatever we're doing, as opposed to like, okay, let me hurry up and get out of here so I gotta go do this next thing, but actually, okay, this feels really good, this is relaxing, let me like just pay attention to these sensations, those kinds of things. And when we have those kinds of moments, it's important to take them.
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad I flew to Atlanta to get my free therapy session. I needed it.
I'm very happy it's helpful.
But thank you. And I know the work that you are doing is transcending and changing so many lives that you would never be able to see and hear their stories. So, for the people that are watching, they have to definitely check out Therapy for Black Girls.
Yes, please do.
Because you're doing such a great work.
Thank you.
So
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Joy.
I hope you were inspired by this conversation on The Journey with Blue. Join me on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe on YouTube to continue the encouragement. And remember that whatever road you decide to take, the beauty lies within the journey. Until next time, Blue.